Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark, and like you, I'm a professional speaker and I love listening to Speakernomics. Speakernomics is a professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world, one keynote session, workshop, and speech at a time. And on this episode, we welcome Diana Kander. Diana is an innovation consultant, an innovation keynote speaker, a former professor, and a former attorney, and a New York Times bestselling author whose books have been taught in over 100 universities. Diana, welcome to Speakernomics. I'm curious, how are you today?
I'm very warm. I don't know if you can tell on the video stream. I'm glistening over here because it's over 100 degrees in Kansas City, and the AC is just not keeping up.
I thought the compliment was just going to be that Speakernomics was
I'm just so anxious to be here.
Yes, exactly. Well, now to all my speaking friends, how do you leverage curiosity to build your business? It's one thing to be curious and innovative, but if you're really leveraging that curiosity muscle, it's another to ask the right questions and apply that mindset to building your speaking business. And before we jump in, make sure to go to speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. Diana, after an amazing performance, I got to see you give and perform at Influence in 2024. Let's dive in. Before we jump into this, I really want to talk about that moment you had on stage. How was presenting at Influence compared to all the different events? You've been speaking for quite a few years. That main stage opportunity must have felt great.
I would say it was the best day of my professional life. And I had only been to one Influence before that. So most of the people who get to be on the main stage have been coming for, 20, 30 years. And to get to go on the stage was just like such an honor for me.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, make sure when they get it loaded to the vault, take a look. And I'm telling you right now, between Snoop Dogg, Simone Biles, and videos from 1957, it's an amazing performance. So question one, how has curiosity really influenced your approach to creating and delivering speeches and working as a speaker?
I think it's this belief that things can always be better. That is the core of what drives me. And I think a lot of times when we get pretty good, we kind of slow down and we start pumping all of our time and money into marketing and promotion. And I think you're never done improving the core product that you sell as a speaker, which is the speech. So I would say a lot of my success so far has been to constantly keep iterating and improving the content.
How do you do that? How do you break down your content? Is it,
I would say,
stories or what is it primarily that you're working on as part of there's a lot of people that when they feel like they have a great speech are afraid to touch it.
Yes. Like a book, like a good book. And
exactly.
That's why book writing is so hard for me, because I want to fix it as soon as it's published. It's a big problem, but you can iterate a speech. And so I do it a couple of different ways. I talked about some of these in the Keynote and Influence. Number one, you should find inspiration for just like general ideas outside the box. So when I went to Influence last year, I heard the first thing that I heard was Mark Sharon Brock talk about how you pick out the 3 best parts of your speech, and the best part, the number one chunk, that should go at the very end. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, my ending is not the best part. So how do I reconfigure it? And I heard other speakers talk about what you can do with your story and how you can extend it, manipulate it, like play with it. And so that gave me ideas on what I could try. So I constantly try to bring in content from the outside to make me think differently about different parts of my speech.
Well, how do you know when it's not too much coming in from outside, though? There's a point where you have to stop because you can be overwhelmed with so many great ideas that come from outside that at some point you have to put a little bit of a pause on, this is so good, but I can't cram more in.
Yeah. I think I myself am like, oh, this speech is almost there. So I think of myself on the scale of 1 to 10, and I think of the individual speeches that way too. On a scale of 1 to 10, where is it today compared to what it's capable of? Like, is there room for improvement? And if there is room, then look for inspiration. And if you've gotten it to a 10 out of 10, which I would strongly push against, like ask somebody you trust for advice on whether it's a 10 out of 10. But if you feel like you've gotten it there, then let's move on to the next speech that you're working on. But I will tell you, the speech that you saw, I've been working on that for a decade, trying different pieces and content. And so it's an evolution that really takes, I think, a long time to find all the pieces and all the jokes and all the pauses that really work the best.
Yeah, well, I'm guilty of this too, because I love the whole concept of curiosity, especially somebody nicknamed Shark, and sharks are known for being curious. I will take my own speeches, and I can't ever be happy with them. I constantly have to think of new things, but it sometimes can be overwhelming to figure out, okay, this is good. Let's let it breathe. And that becomes a little bit of a struggle sometimes for me as well.
I also don't think about the speech as its own individual unit, like this is this speech and this is that speech. And I'll say, oh, I have a chunk that could work in here. I actually think about all of my content in a series of chunks. And over 10 years, I've maybe come up with 100. So a lot of the content that I had at Influence is content I don't really use on stage anymore. It's like old stuff. I don't want to say old, classic Diana material. But there are
Classic
chunks that I now have available to me, so that when a client calls and they're like, this is our situation, I'm like, oh, you could use this chunk and this chunk and this chunk with classic open and classic ending. And that really helps me customize content. And so I will pick a chunk that worked the best in a keynote, especially when I'm trying to be curious, and I will forbid myself from using it for a period of 3 months to force myself to just come up with anything else. And sometimes that anything else is not as good, but sometimes that anything else is so much better. So you have to handicap yourself. You have to give yourself parameters that say, I can't use this awesome material to be able to come up with better content.
Yeah, I love the idea of chunks. It's a great idea. So how do you cultivate curiosity then in your research process for new speeches? You speak to a lot of different industries. You've worked with a lot of different clients. This is obviously different for all people, but you've got to really lean in to hit where the context is for the audience at hand.
For sure. So let's define curiosity. For me, it is the space between what you know and what you don't know. And most of us, we show up to work with no space, right? Like we have a to-do list. We have things that we're trying to accomplish. And I try as hard as I can to insert space into my life and my work. So one of the ways I do that is by literally creating space on my calendar for improving my content and my business. And what we're discussing now, creating space about really being curious about the companies that you serve. So you might say, oh, this is a healthcare client and I've done lots of healthcare stuff. And so I feel like I got the gist, of what this is going to be. But give yourself like an ounce of curiosity, some space to say, what is different about this client or their situation right now where I could offer a new value and really bring the context of how my content applies to their current situation.
Yeah, that context flows like water. That reminds me of a large company that I used to do a lot of work with. And then about a year later, I spoke for them. And the entire group of people were all new. Things had changed so radically for them. I think at first I went in thinking, oh, I've got this. I used to work closely with them. I didn't give my space enough time to breathe until I sort of saw the people in the audience. And that opened my mindset now to look at things as there's a moment in time where you think you know stuff as well. And then that time expands to being curious to learn something more about where they are now as opposed to where you thought they were.
Yes. Oh, there's a great quote. Only the paranoid survive.
Yes.
And anytime I feel like super confident that I've got this and I'm great, that is the time where I'm the most paranoid. I'm like, nope, there's a big blind spot that I'm missing that's going to get me. So let me try to figure out what that is. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be confident, but for me, high confidence is a sign that I am overlooking something important.
So in what ways does curiosity enhance your side of the business side of speaking with the marketing? You alluded to that briefly, and that is something that we spend much too much time on, and I'm a marketing guy. But with curiosity and how you lean into that with marketing, with networking, with all the things, if you will, how do you really apply that towards helping grow the business?
Okay. two answers to this. The first one is your prioritization. I think there's few other businesses other than Speaker where there's so many shiny objects for what you could invest significant amounts of time and money into. Should you write a new book? Should you start a course? Should you invest in hiring a social media marketing manager? It's just like 1,000 different directions. Should you start a mastermind? I'm going to stop brainstorming these, but they come up all the time. And if you go to influencer, you speak with a lot of speakers, it's just somebody's doing something to try to move their business forward. I beg you, again, I have the scale right here behind me, 1 through 10. Think about how much actual value and ROI these kinds of things bring to your business. Like, think about where all your business is coming from and double down on those activities first. Get really good at the handful of things that are oftentimes very basic. Like, instead of doing the really complicated things, it's often like getting better at relationship management. Do you know what I mean? Like following up for referrals. That's going to get you the most business. Get good at the few things that are 9s and 10s in your business before you add on chunks that are not as valuable, but take up a lot of time. Okay. So that, I would say, that's the first way I use curiosity, is how I prioritize my time. And the second way is I try to give myself space to reimagine a significant part of my business on a regular basis. So in December of last year, I met with another speaker and we had a brainstorming session to think about our customer experience from like start to finish, and about all of those moments that we can create along the way for something that is different or special. And then in June of this year, I met with a different speaker and we had like a strategic session where we talked about all the things that were working for our business and compared notes and picked out the like 2 or 3 things that we wanted to double down on, including the materials that people had afterwards and making sure the brand was consistent between materials and slides and website. So I would say I want to take time every 6 months to just pick an area of my business and reimagine what it could look like.
One of the things I thought you did really well at Influence that you even talked about on stage, and you talked about this, I think, in your session as well, is, you didn't climb Mount Everest or you didn't swim with sharks or anything. It wasn't like that kind of way that you applied how to be innovative. But I think a lot of times speakers struggle trying to figure out how to make themselves innovative when they haven't necessarily seen that reflected in magical feats they may have done, if that makes sense at all. But I thought you brilliantly handled how to apply innovation with real world applications, if you will.
Sure. Well, I will tell you, a lot of these stories start with, I was talking to another speaker, and I would say it's why I love this show. It's why I love talking to another speaker at least every other day, because they give me perspective and insights that I don't have otherwise. And I had somebody review, like once a quarter, I like to have a speaker I look up to review my full keynote and give me very negative advice as much as possible. And one of the most biting pieces of feedback that I got was, I don't know why you're the person talking about this innovation stuff. And I will tell you, all that personal stuff that's only been around for about a year, because I was like, nobody cares about me. I just want to give them content, really good content. And he was like, no, but why is it you giving this speech? And I'm like, well, I was a refugee and the only way I survived was innovating. And he was like, yeah, that's good stuff. And so it took somebody else's perspective for me to be like, oh, that's the thing that's valuable. And it has changed how people react to my keynotes now. It's gone from, hey, thanks for a great keynote, to thank you for sharing your story. It's same takeaways, like I can't wait to apply this stuff, but now we're having like a deeper connection. And once I had a taste for that, I was like, oh, I really like how that relationship that I'm establishing with the audience.
How do you apply curiosity when you're on the phone or in an email exchange with meeting planners and events and bureaus and all those things? I tend to ask a lot of questions, and I sometimes try to figure out how much of it is. I'm generally trying to figure out how to apply that curiosity to help them versus that small, thin line of not annoy them with too many questions versus the other line of a lot of speakers who don't ask enough because they've got it dialed in.
Yeah. I think curiosity is not a volume game. So it's not ask as many questions as possible. Know that there's a hierarchy to questions. Some questions are better than others. So I like to have a core set of questions that are very important for me to understand every single event. Why did you hire me? What do you hope my session is going to accomplish on behalf of the event? Tell me what you're trying to accomplish with the event as a whole, and then tell me who's in the room and what their like level in the organization is. So like some core questions. And then I just follow my own curiosity. Oh, we're doing this. Oh, why did you pick that as a theme? And what does this mean to your organization? And it gives me some insight, a little bit deeper into things that might help me create context for that speech. But just understand some questions are better than others. And yes, if you just go for a high volume, it could be very annoying.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to avoid doing that as well.
I highly recommend Matt Bauer to be your videographer. And if you are a professional speaker, he knows exactly what you need.
I highly recommend Matt Bauer for your next event. Incredible to work with, professional, reliable, and flexible at the same time.
My name is Mary Kelly, and I hate video, and that's why I need Matt Bauer. He's going to make you look good, sound good, help you get booked, increase your speaker fees, and help you tell the story that you want to convey to the people who need to hear it.
For more information, go to speakervideo.com.
Before we jump back to the show, here's a moment from the halls at NSA's conference Influence with NSA member, speaker, and CSP, Dr. Jermaine Davis.
Dr. Jermaine, what does NSA mean to you and how it's helping you build your business?
What NSA means to me is I have an abundance of gratitude. And I have an abundance of gratitude because it taught me how to ethically monetize my message and the principles and practices that I deeply believe in. It taught me how not to be a starving artist because of the resources, the insights, and the lived experiences that people have. They share that. And I love that. That's why it's easy for me to promote the National Speakers Association and my chapter, the Minnesota Speakers Association. I'm always indebted to them.
So a question I want to ask you from a previous guest. This came from Hall of Famer, Cavett Award, CSP. He's got all the speaker pronouns, Dr. Willie Jolly. And he asked, put it in this context, Diane, if you were coming to Washington, D.C., and he came to hear you, and then you went to lunch, he took you to a college, university, and he maybe to a business class, and he introduced you to some speakers, and he asked you to give them advice. What are the three gatas? And he asked this on his radio show as well. What are the three gatas for success in business and life that you would give them?
What a big question. We could just do the whole interview over the three gatas.
We'll break down each one of the gatas. Yeah. Gata number 2. Yeah.
I would say you gotta try a lot of things to figure out what you really like and what you're good at. And you might have a hypothesis about what kind of speaker you are and what you should be talking about, but giving yourself the opportunity to try different things can be like, oh yeah, definitely not this. So I constantly try to put myself outside my comfort zone. I'm a corporate speaker, but I've done in the last year, like a high school group. I did the preschool teachers at my daughter's preschool for their annual kickoff. Like I'm just trying new stuff to push my limits to see what I like and what I don't like. So try new stuff to figure out what you like. Number 2, you got to keep working on the product forever. It's never done. And at the moment that you stop, that is I believe, the moment that your business starts to suffer as a result, and your income is a lagging indicator. So it's an indicator of what you did 3 years ago. And the moment you start to stop improving the core product is the moment that it's going to suffer 3 years down the line. And for the third one, it's leave everyone better off for interacting with you. You know, this is a relationship business, and you're going to build relationships with bureaus and event planners and other speakers. And if you just have that as a core philosophy, I think you're going to be very successful in life.
Diana, what is a question that you would like to ask a future guest on this show?
What is something that you do differently than other speakers to improve your content or grow your business?
Let's do a quick recap then based on Diana's fantastically curious advice. Number one, find inspiration from outside and constantly reconfigure or at least give yourself the space to do that. Give yourself space to innovate. Think about how you can create something new and innovative. And I love this point about giving your speech a look at in chunks. I'm going to use the book analogy, not just in chapters, but maybe even a paragraph inside of that chapter. Think of places that you can reuse that. Number two, curiosity is her space between what she knows and doesn't know. Create some space about really being curious. Number three, this is for everybody. Prioritize the shiny objects and think about how much value and ROI each one can bring. Double down on the things that are revenue producing. Get good at the things you do well. That's your ROI. Diana, I know I'm going to see you again, especially after that performance at an NSA event somewhere soon or some other stage. We'll run across each other. Any last closing thoughts before we speak ourselves off the stage and go get curious somewhere?
I think this is the most special industry that we can be in. I pinch myself every time before I go on a stage, not just the NSA stage, but I love the people who all have an incredible idea that they're the passionate stewards of. And I love what we get to do on a daily basis. So anything I can help for others, I would love to be a resource.
Fantastic. Friends, make sure to join us at Speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics, and this has been another very fantastic and curious episode of the show. Thank you, Diana, for your service to NSA and for lending your story to the show. And to everyone listening, thank you for the privilege of your time. And remember, Speakernomics is a podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.